Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, BERNINA DesignWorks Paint Play. You can submit questions by typing them into the questions pane of the control panel. You can submit questions anytime during the presentation. Our presenter is Debbie Lashbrook. Welcome, Debbie.
Thank you, Julie, and welcome everyone. I hope everyone is staying safe, and I am pleased to present this webinar to you on the Paintwork tool. The files that will be posted on the website following the webinar include the handout, which can be downloaded from the webinar site, but there are extra files that you will get when you go to the website. And after the presentation, Julie will tell you when that will be posted. There will be a draw file that you see down here, which is a painted pattern file that is ready for you to bring into the software and then export to the machine. There's also going to be a presentation PDF on the website. So just to remind you where you find this on the website, you'll go to bernina.com, click on Learn and Create, and then go to Webinars, and you will see all three of those pieces when you click on the DesignWorks webinar. What we'll be covering tonight, first of all, editing Paintwork files. And one of the things that we can do is divide and direct painted fills. We'll also cover some of the different types of painted fills that you can have with DesignWorks software. In addition, I'm going to cover how to create a painted design from an embroidery file. So if you've not ever done that, it's quite easy to do. And we'll also talk about creating painted patterns using a combination of DesignWorks software and BERNINA Embroidery Software. Now, the pattern that I used is pictured here on the slide, but you really could use any pattern that you want to use. This is just the one that I used for my project. The focus on this webinar is not on the project, but how to use DesignWorks software and edit the files. These are the supplies that you would need to complete the project. Of course, fabric, and you usually are going to want a light colored fabric in order to show the design. Any number of paint pens can be used, and there are lots of different brands. This is just one that you see here on the slide set. I also use Stitch Witchery as a bonding agent, and then I used Heavyweight Cutaway and Stable Stick Tearaway Stabilizers by OESD. I used the Edge Stitch Foot number 10D, and then a yard of ribbon is needed. So the focus on the webinar is on the Paintwork tool, which you see pictured here. And if you've not ever seen the Paintwork tool, it is housed in a box, and there are 4 different sizes of inserts, and you choose your insert based on the size of the pin. You want a nice snug fit so the pin doesn't slip, and the size of insert will vary depending on the brand of pin that you choose. I'm going to cover how you use the Paintwork tool, but if you forget or need a refresher, you can go to bernina.com and select software and the DesignWorks software, and then click on tutorials. There are tutorials posted on both how to use the software as well as how to use the Paintwork tool itself. So we'll go ahead and switch over to the software to cover the lesson. I've already opened DesignWorks software, but if you have not used your DesignWorks software, remember it does open with the wizard. So to reactivate the wizard, I can go to File, New. And this is the fabric dialog box. For a Paintwork tool, it doesn't really need a particular setting. So I'm just going to select Next in this. And from File is selected. I scanned the pattern into the software, primarily just to get an idea of the size of the design I was going to use. So I've scanned this earlier, saved it on my computer, and I'm going to browse and find the location of the scanned file and click on Open. And then I'll click on Next. I want to select Open as a backdrop because I'm only using this scan to get an idea of the size of the design, and I'll click on Finish. And then you can see the pattern here. Now to place the design on the scan, I need to go to File, Open. I'm going to use one of the built-in designs in the software. And I navigate there by clicking on this PC, C drive, users, public documents, and BERNINA DesignWorks sample folder. So that is the file path, and that file path is on your handout. I'm going to go to the Paintwork folder, and these are all sorts of built-in painted designs that are ready to send to your machine to paint with the Paintwork tool. I'm going to select this 011 and click on Open, and it will open in a new file. I can then select the bits and pieces that I want from this file and place them on my scanned pattern. So one of the first things I'm going to do, and the rectangle selection tool is the default selected tool, I'm going to click and drag a bounding box around the part of this design that I want to grab. And I'll select Copy, and then go to the Scan folder and select Paste. Now I can move it, and I rest my cursor on the outline around the image, and when I get that four-pointed arrow, I can move the design. I don't really want to move it right now because you can see that I've got bits and pieces that I didn't grab that I need to get. So I'm going to have to go back over to my original design, and you'll see that the green leaf did not fill in on my copied design. So I need to grab those green pieces. Now to get those pieces, I can right-click on the color chip in the brushes palette and select by fill color. And you'll notice that the color chips are divided into two different pieces. The lower right part of the color chip corresponds to the fill, and the upper left area of the color chip corresponds to an outline. So when I select this fill, I can then copy, go back over to my design, and paste. Now I got some extra pieces, bits and pieces here. So if I select this, you'll see that the outline is around all of those pieces. So if I just want to delete this one piece, I'm going to have to right-click on this and break this apart. That way I can select this object that I don't want and delete that. And I'll select this leaf and delete that. And that leaves just the part that I want. So it's very easy to delete your unwanted areas. You first either will need to break apart or ungroup them, whichever the case may be, and then you can select the bits and pieces that you want. Now, another thing that you might want to do is do a little bit of changing the color or rearranging the order of the painted design. And you can see that this green stem is actually painting on top of the purple petal. And I don't want that to happen. I want the stem to paint first. There's something called auto sequence control. I'm just going to click on this to show you that when I have it activated, I only have one painted layer. When I deactivate that and click OK in this dialog box, I have 34 different painted layers. To make it easy to select certain areas I can click on this group by color icon, and it's the very first one that you see in Sequence Manager. So when I click on that, I now have all my green color on one tray. So it makes it very easy to select that tray in the Sequence Manager and drag it to the very beginning. And now you can see that the stem is behind the purple flower. Another thing I might want to do is get rid of this orange center. And when I click on the flower, you can see that it selects everything. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to ungroup this design so that I can select just the purple flower or the orange center. But you see, when I select this, I'm actually selected the outline. So it's kind of hard to select just the part that you need, but you have lots of different ways to select in this software. And one of the easiest ways is to just select it in the Sequence Manager tray and then press delete. And that's going to leave just that center flower. If I want to change the color, I can again click on this, hoping that I'll select the yellow, but you can see again, I'm in the outline tab, which means I've actually selected the outline and not the fill. So to help you quickly and easily select, you can either do the Sequence Manager, or another way to select is to right click on the color that you want and select by fill color. Now I have the yellow color, and if I want to change the color of the fill, I can just click in the lower right-hand corner of the color that I want it changed to. Keep in mind that you don't have to set up the colors that you want to use in the file, because just like threads, when you're picking out a thread to put on the machine to stitch, it doesn't have to be the same thing that's in the design. But sometimes it's nice to preview the color combinations before you send them to the machine. So whether you're working with paint pens or thread colors, it does help sometimes to visualize what it's going to look like. So we can change colors. We can pick bits and pieces of a design, but we can also change the fill type of a design. So with this, I'm going to hold down the Shift key and select every other petal in this purple flower. And over in Object Properties, the Fill tab is now selected. And this tells me the type of fill it is, which is just a plain painted fill. And I'm going to change that to a zigzag fill. And you can see that the color is a little more intense with the zigzag fill. I can also change the density of this, and let's go ahead and select the flower center again and change the density of this by placing a check mark in front of density. And I'll change this to 0.8 and press enter. So this is going to make a more intense color because it's not as open. Now we have another thing that we can do, and let's come down to the small purple flower. I'm holding down the Control key, which also works to select multiples, and I'll click on each of the purple. A lot of times, if you have trouble selecting something, if you'll zoom in a bit, that will help you select it. And here we're going to apply a paint net fill. And this applies a kind of a checkerboard pattern. I can also change the cell size of this and make it closer together, and just press enter to activate that change. Now let's go ahead and hide the backdrop. That way you can see what I'm going to be doing for additional editing. To hide the backdrop, go to View, Backdrop, and Hide, and that will temporarily hide our pattern piece. And so you'll be able to see a little bit better what I'm going to do next. And that is to change the direction of the petals. This gives the flower petals more dimension and more of a real look. So I can select the petal that I want to change, and I click on the direction icon, and I have a red dot attached to my mouse, and I just click and drag while holding the mouse button down to change the direction of the fill. And I can do that with each fill. When you see that I have a no sign, that is indicated when I rest my mouse on the outline around the petal. I have to have the interior selected in order to apply the direction. So it's just a click and a drag across, so you get the paint going in the direction that you want it to paint. I can select the rectangle selection tool to make that icon disappear. Now, for these leaves, we're going to do something in addition to the direction for these, and we're going to divide the leaf. The divide tool will only work with your row fill or your zigzag fill. So the first thing I have to do is hold down the Shift key, and I'm going to select both my fills and change them to zigzag. So I can select the petal and then go to the divide icon and click and drag across the leaf, and you can see that it created a line across. I'm going to also do that with this second leaf. And once it's divided, I can now change the direction of each of the petals to give the leaf a little bit more dimension. Now, if I want to remove that, I can just click on the X, and that will take away the direction. Or I can also move either end and get some different looks. So you can lay down the direction and then fine tune it if you need to do that. Again, I'll select the Select Object tool, and I now have my painted leaves. I'm going to bring back the picture by going to View, Backdrop, and I'm going to put it below the embroidery because I want to resize this design. And I'm going to draw a bounding box around the flower. And if I rest my cursor in the corner, I can click and drag and resize that flower and fill up the back of the pattern. I also want to add an initial to personalize this. So I'll do that with the Edit Text tool. And you have any number of fonts, and these are the fonts, the TrueType fonts that you have installed on your computer. And you can select the font and then click on the screen and type in the font. When I select the font with the rectangle selection, I can use my corner handles to resize the letter, or I can go back to the Edit Text and enter a specific font size. So either way, that is how you would increase the size of the font. Now, if I deselect, you can see that there's a very jagged edge here on the letters. And that's because this is only a fill stitch. when you type in a letter, it will not automatically add an outline, but it's really easy to add an outline by first selecting the letter. And then if I want to add the very same color as my letter, I can click in the upper left corner of my color used chip, and it will add an outline. And you can see how adding that outline smooths the edges of that letter. I'll zoom out here, and then I can move this and place it wherever I want on the pattern. Again, you don't have to use this pattern. There are any number of patterns that you can choose to paint on. Now I'm going to also add an extra flower petal up here on the flap, and I'm going to zoom in. You always will be more accurate if you zoom in, and I'm going to select this flower, and I'm going to copy and paste. And now I will wait till I get my move symbol, and I can move it and drop it in the corner. I can also resize it. I can move it again and place it just exactly where I want it placed. So we're pretty much done with this. So it's ready to save. You would just do File, Save As, and navigate to the location to save the file. After you save it, you can click on Export, and then the machines that use the Paintwork tool all use the EXP format. So I can click on EXP, and my design is now sent to my USB stick to use on a machine for Paintwork. Now the front of the the front is already done for you, but I'm going to show you how I created that in just a minute. Once you download the draw file from the website, you can go to File, Open, and you will navigate to the location. I actually put it on my desktop, and the front of the pattern looks like this. Now, it has both a fill and an outline, and I can tell that because when I select the design and look down in my colors used, I have a paint bucket and I have the outline pin. So I know it's both an outline and a fill. I can change the colors if I want by just clicking in the lower right corner and the upper left corner. I can have a contrast outline if I want a contrast outline by first selecting the objects and then clicking in the upper left corner. And now I have a black outline around my painted red fill. So you can do any number of changes that you want in this file. This then is, once you get your changes done, you can save that file, and then it is also ready to export then to the machine. So let's talk about how, first of all, I can take an embroidery design and turn it into a painted design. This wasn't part of this particular design for this project, but it's so quick and easy to do. I thought you might like to know how to do this. So I'll select File, New to open the wizard. I'll click on Next, and then go to From Embroidery and click on Browse. And this opens to a folder that has several different built-in designs that are embroidery designs. I'm going to click on the drop-down arrow by files of type so you can see all the different formats that DesignWorks will work with. The built-in format is called NGS, and you can see that it also works with EXP files and many other types of files. For those of you who have BERNINA Embroidery Software, We work with art files, and art files cannot be opened in DesignWorks. So you would have to open the art file and then save it in another format in order to open it in DesignWorks. So I'm going to choose just one of the NGS files to show you how quick and easy you can create a painted design from an embroidery file. I'm going to select CDW0031 and click on Open, and then click on Next. Now notice our colors are up in the thread category. They're not in the brushes. So I know this is going to be a stitched design. Then I click on Finish, and when I zoom in, you can see the stitches. In order to turn this into a paintwork design, all I have to do is drag the bounding box around the design and right-click and select Convert to Curves. Now when I zoom in, this is a painted design. And I can also click on Slow Redraw, and I can see that I've got the paint symbol painting the design, not the number 26 foot stitching the design. So it's very quick and easy to take an embroidery file and turn it into a painted design for use with your Paintwork tool. I had to create the floral patterns for the front of this case a little bit differently. I couldn't just right-click on the stitch line and convert to curves. And this did require BERNINA Embroidery Software. And I'm going to show you two different ways to do this. The first way, I'll start with BERNINA Embroidery Software and create a pattern run in BERNINA Embroidery Software, and then bring it into DesignWorks. And then the second way, I'll create a pattern in DesignWorks Software, which will eventually turn into Paint. So for this first one, I'm going to open up BERNINA Embroidery Software. Now, for those of you who have version 7 software, you can also do this in version 7 software. I'm going to go to my digitized toolbox and select Pattern Stamp. And you have lots of different pattern stamps, and you can even make your own pattern stamps in software as well. The one that I chose is actually in the nature category, and I'm going to choose stitch 112. If you are looking at the outline view, remember all you need to do is click on the true view and you can see the way the stitches will look. I'll select it and click OK. And with 2 left clicks, I'm going to create the pattern. If I hold down the Shift key and drag, I can enlarge the pattern. I'll click. Let me do that again. Remember to click before you release the mouse. And if I want to, of course, rotate the design a little bit, I could rotate it. I can do all sorts of things to the design. I could change the color if I wanted to as well. I'm going to select that design and go to the Mirror Merge toolbox and select the array. I want 2 columns, and then I can pick any number of repeats that I want. And I want my rows to touch, but I want my columns separated because I want to be able to drag a bounding box around that extra column of stitches and press delete. Now, if I wanted to create 2 of the same stitches, I could definitely keep the other column of stitches, but I only am wanting 1 for this. Once I get the design created, I'm going to select everything and click on Convert Embroidery or Convert embroidery to artwork, and this will create a vector image in Corel Draw. I'll then click on copy and reopen my BERNINA DesignWorks, and let's see, I'll just go to the this image, and I'm going to select this and delete this image, and I can just paste that row of stitches in here. Actually, it's a row of painted flowers. If I wanted to open a new file, I would go File, New, work through the artwork source, select New Graphic, and Finish, and then I could paste it in there. And when I zoom in, this is a painted file. I can change the colors if I want to. I could resize it if I wanted to. In certain cases, there might be a stitch that you wanted to add an outline to. So you can do any number of things. Now, I'm going to select that and delete it. And this time we're going to start in DesignWorks Software and create a stitch for painting. For this, I'm going to use the Create Bezier shape. That's a nice, easy tool to create a straight line with. It takes a click, and I hold down the Control key. That keeps my line straight. And I'm going to click again. I'll right-click to end the line, and then press the space bar to select the line. And for this, you've got all these stitches to choose from. Some of them will be successful, others not so successful. You'll just have to experiment. I'm going to choose stitch 50. And when I zoom in, this is really a tiny, compact stitch. So what I want to do is I want to lengthen the stitch as well as widen it. I'll put a check mark by length and then increase the size of this to 6 millimeters and press enter. So you can see this is going to be much more open and it will paint a lot better. Now I cannot just right click and select convert to curves. There's no convert option with a stitched line. So I have to also use software 8 to create this. And the way I'm going to do this is with the line selected, I'm going to go ahead and export this as an EXP file. Then I'll go back to BERNINA Embroidery Software and I'm going to open a new file and click on Open Design. I'll navigate to my USB and I want to make sure that I have all embroidery files selected. And I will select that design that I just exported. Just as something that you might want to do is be sure and name your files. Otherwise, you won't have all these untitled files. So if you remember to name them before you export them, it will help you figure out which one is which. I'll select it and click on Open, click on OK, and now I can select that design and click on Convert. This is going to once again take that stitched file and convert it into artwork, and it will be a vector artwork. I can then copy it and go back to DesignWorks, and I will paste it. So here I have the stitched file. Here I have the painted lines. So again, you have lots of different stitches that you can choose from. You'll just have to experiment to see which ones work for you, but remember to open up the stitch by changing the length. The length affects not only the length of the pattern, but also the width of the pattern. Now let's go back to the PowerPoint, and I'll talk about how this was created. So when you're using the Paintwork tool, first hoop stable stick tearaway, and I find that I have better luck painting without my slide-on tray. So I'm going to remove the slide-on tray as well. I'm going to place the stable stick tearaway, peel the paper away, and then smooth the fabric over the stabilizer. If you have thread in your machine, you'll cut your thread and remove the thread, remove the needle. It's okay to keep the bobbin case in there, and then you have a cutwork throat plate that you'll place on the machine. Select the insert that is needed for the tool, and you want a tight fit. You don't want the pin to be able to move up and down. You'll select that insert and put it in the paint accessory. And I like to first put my pin on in the tool before I attach it to the machine. So I work a little bit opposite. These slides were taken from the video that's posted on the website. So my only difference is that I will hold the pin in my hand, or the tool in my hand, as I insert the pin. So you're going to attach the Paintwork tool to the machine, and the pin guard lowers so that you know how far to insert the pin. So you'll rest the tip of the pin right on the base of that red guard. And there you can see the pin is inserted. And then you close the latch, and the latch is this black piece up here that tightens the pin. And then be sure and lift the guard before you start to paint. It's also a good idea to test the level of the Paintwork pin. So whatever type of fabric you're working on, you can protect that fabric with just a piece of stable stick tearaway that you tear off a corner and lay that over your fabric, and then begin to paint the design. You want the paint pen to just glide nicely over the surface of the fabric. You don't want it digging into the fabric. You don't want the fabric scooting at all. You just want a nice flow of the ink onto the fabric. So in some cases, you might find that you need to adjust it. And to adjust the pen level, if you turn the lever toward you, it's going to raise the pin. If you turn it away from you and toward the machine, it's going to lower the pin. So the more contact the pin has with the fabric, the more intense the color. But you will also, you don't want the pin to scoot the fabric at all. Now, once you test the pin, of course, you're no longer at the beginning of the design. So there are a couple of ways to get back to the original part. And one is through the embroidery sequence control, or this broken thread icon. And then you can take the design back to 0. Or I find this a lot easier. I can click on the next color icon and then go back one color and be back at the beginning after doing that. You'll want to test with each color change. Some of the pins, especially if you use different brands, the flow of the dye comes out a little bit differently depending on the brand of pin. So you want to test with each color change. And you will paint both the front and the back of your fabric. Then I cut stabilizer and the fusible using the pattern that I was going to use for this. And I stabilize the pouch with heavyweight cutaway. And I cut 2 pieces of that. And I cut 4 pieces of stitch witchery. So the way I layered this, I had the painted piece with the wrong side up. then a layer of stitch witchery, which again is a double-sided fusible without a paper backing. I laid down heavyweight cutaway, another layer of stitch witchery, and then the lining wrong side down. And I pressed all those pieces, and the fusible then adhered the fabric to the heavyweight cutaway that was in the middle. Then you can kind of see the outline here of the pattern piece. You can either cut with scissors or cut with a rotary cutter, whichever you prefer. And then I trimmed both the back and the front. I used an edge stitch foot with a triple stitch, which is stitch 6 in -1 needle position, to stitch around all the edges. And then I finished each of the flap edges with the edge stitch foot, stitch number 3, which is the very overlock stitch, needle position of -2. I changed the length of 1 and the width to 2.5. These values, all this information is going to be on the PDF of the presentation, so you don't need to take notes on this. You'll have it on that PDF. I tacked the ribbon then on the flap, and I used 1D to do this. I used stitch number 25, which is the bar tack, and I used a width of 4 for a 1/4 inch ribbon. And then I put the front and back together, and I used just wrong sides together because I did use that very overlock to finish the edges. And I used edge stitch foot number 10 and stitch number 1, needle position of -1, and went all around the front and the back. And then finished the edge with the edge stitch foot 10D, stitch 3, the same needle position as I used before, length of 1 and width of 2.5. And that is the finished project. I want to remind you that when you're picking out some of these patterns, to be sure and go to the help reference manual in BERNINA Software 8. And if you go to the appendices, glossary, and index, and then click on pattern, stamp, run, and fill samples, you have pages and pages of all different types of pattern stamps to use and to test for this technique. And Julie, I am ready for questions.
Thank you, Debbie. We did have a few questions come through during the presentation. The first question is, what do you do if you have a pen that is slipping? Is there a way to make it more snug?
Well, you can, if you can choose a smaller insert, if that of course is a way to do it. And I would just, when you test it, you should know if it's slipping or not. So you can try a smaller insert. If you're using the smallest one that's available, wrap the pin with masking tape to create some bulk around the pin, and that will hold it better. It may take several wraps to do that, depending on how slippery it is.
Okay. Let's see. The next question is, when you go to paint your design on the fabric, how do you place the design so that it is in the right place, exactly where you want the design to start?
Well, I obviously did not need to use that for this project because I painted the design first and then cut my fabric to fit. But if I was painting on, say, something that was ready-made and it needed to go to a specific spot, it's really no different than when you're embroidering. You can use placement lines, and it doesn't have to be a stitched placement line. You can actually draw a placement line with the drawing tools and paint a placement line on your stabilizer, and then put the project exactly where it needs to be. You can also use And for machines that have absolute check, you can use absolute check and test where that pen is going to paint. And then for machines that have pinpoint placement, you can use pinpoint placement, picking out 2 points and adjusting the position of the pen according to the way it needs to be. So I would suggest just review some of the information that you have about perfect placement. So placement lines, pinpoint placement, or absolute check are always.
Great. And the next question, can you paint on Craftex or Cork fabric?
Oh yes, both of them. And the paint pens work beautiful on both Craftex as well as Cork. You can paint on any number of surfaces. You can paint on interfacing, you can paint on silk. I've painted on felt, I've painted on burlap, just all sorts of different surfaces can be painted.
Okay. Will there be more webinars on paintwork in the near future?
It kind of depends on how long this quarantine goes on, or not quarantine, but how long we're shelter in place.
Yes.
If we continue into May, I plan on adding another DesignWorks webinar. When I start traveling again, though, there won't be as much time. So it's just going to be kind of play it by ear. I do have an additional webinar on Software 8 coming up toward the end of this month. And if we are still sheltering in place in May, I will have an additional webinar.
Okay. The next question, DesignWorks opens in a number of embroidery formats. I generally use EXP or ART. Does it open other formats?
Okay, now DesignWorks will not open ART. Are you talking about design? Is she talking about DesignWorks, or is she talking about Software 8? Which way does the question read?
DesignWorks.
Okay, DesignWorks will open EXP. It will not open ART. So if you're working with an ART file, you're going to have to open it in Software 8 and then export it as another format in order to open it in DesignWorks. So what that would look like is I can go into my embroidery software and I'll get a new file, and let's just open a design here. So if I wanted to paint this, for example, there are a couple of different ways I can do this. This is an art file. And if I try to open this in DesignWorks, it will not open in DesignWorks. I can select this design though, and I can convert it. Just the same way as I did that stitch. Now it is a vector image. I can copy that, open my DesignWorks software, and let me just, I'll go to File, New, Next, New Graphic, because I don't want anything on screen. Click on Finish, and then I can paste. And this is now a painted file. So if I wanted a painted file, I can do it that way. But let's say I really wanted, and let me undo this to get back to the stitch file. Let's say I really wanted to stitch this, and I had an art file that I wanted to stitch. So in this case, I need to write to Card Machine, select the EXP. Then I can go back to my DesignWorks and do File, and then open, or sorry, File New, because I'm getting an embroidery design this time. Place a dot in front of From Embroidery. I place that on my USB stick. There's the design, and I can click on Open, and then Next, and then Finish. And now see, it is a stitch file. When I convert it in embroidery software to a vector image, it's going to be paint. If I want to stitch it in DesignWorks, I have to go through the menu here where I'm going to select the From Embroidery. But if I click on this and go to All Supported, you will not find an art file in this list. It
Okay.
opens a lot of different ones, but it will not open art files.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. And she says, thank you. And we have a few questions about the ink, setting the ink and washing the ink.
Sure. You will want to press it, and most of the fabric pins will give you specific directions. So generally, I press mine. I have a press that I use versus an iron, but you could certainly use an iron. I like to use a press because I can get a nice even heat. And I press it for about 10 seconds. And then it does wash. Some inks are better than others. You want to make sure and use fabric pins, not craft pins, because craft pins will run and they will fade.
Okay.
But if you read the directions that come with the pins, that will give you a clue as to how to set the ink.
Okay. And can you use colored pencils?
I have used colored pencils. I've used charcoal pencils. I've used the, let's see, watercolor pens, and then I've spritzed the watercolor pens with water, and all the colors run together and make a beautiful watercolor piece. So there are lots of, it's so much fun to use the Paintwork tool. I love it.
Yes. Yes, you can get really creative with it.
And it makes good, like the watercolor background makes a good background for adding embroidery and stitching on top of it. So
Oh.
there's all sorts of things that you can do.
Oh, wow. Great. Well, thank you, Debbie. And thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. Tomorrow you will receive a follow-up email from GoToWebinar with a recording. Also, in a couple days, the webinar and the handouts will be available on BERNINA.com. Click on Learn and Create, which is a tab at the top right, then click on Classes, and then Webinars. If you have other questions, please email me or Debbie. On behalf of BERNINA, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Julie, and thank you, everyone, and please stay safe.